Welcome to Centerpoint's Dive In with Matt and Joe.
In this podcast, we're filling in gaps and diving deeper into topics and passages related to the Sunday messages at Centerpoint Church.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Joe. Let's dive in.
Well, welcome everybody. Glad you're joining us for Dive In with Matt and Joe. We got a special guest we're going to introduce in just a couple of moments. But for now, we just want to be able to settle into this message that we tackled this last weekend as a part of our series in Psalm 23. And so we just dialed into that phrase, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Mm-hmm. And it tags on to the phrase, one of the dangers of doing a messages like we're doing them is you can get hyper-focused on one little small piece and forget how they're connected.
How does this piece fit into the puzzle, right?
Yeah. And so the part about the rod and the staff and the comfort is connected to the journey piece, the journey through dark valley.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And so in that journey, there's walking in paths of righteousness or right paths. There's walking through the valley of shadow death, like the deepest of shadows. And then it's this, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And what stood out to you as we looked at, these are tools in the hands of the shepherd.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was helpful when you were describing kind of the purpose of the tools. And it was really helpful for those of you who got to listen to the message live and in person, whether it was through live stream or in person. You got to see Matt actually holding a staff and a rod.
Well, it was so funny, especially the rod is like this foot and a half. It could be like a little billy club.
Looks like
kind of a
billy
thing.
Club, yeah.
And,
with a big old knob on the end of it.
And everybody's eyes, whenever I would pull it out, everybody's eyes got really big. Like, I'm not sure what's about to happen.
What happens if he lets it go?
Yeah. Even in the pre-service prayer time that we do as a group, I talk a little bit about the message there. And so I pull out the rod and staff. Everybody's like, whoa, what is that? Like, that's going to throw the beat down.
So did you feel like you were wielding power in your hands?
Well, you kind of do.
Right?
You kind of do.
So the symbol of authority. You can feel it. So I had a number of people come up afterwards like, can I hold it? And so then they hold it and like, oh, wow, it's kind of weighty. Yep. And
it's not just a stick. And so they felt that. And then I had a guy come up who's a part of our church who is from Kenya. Because I said, the one that I was actually holding was from Kenya.
That's right.
And so he talked about that, and even the dark color meant something.
Oh, wow.
Just like, man, that's like a color of honor with they would call it a marungu.
Okay.
With the marungu, the rod. And
that's
and then it was even funny. He talked about the way that elders will lean on a staff when they're talking.
Oh, yeah.
And so he said, when you were talking to me when you were teaching, and you leaned on the staff, the longer implement, kind of the walking stick. So that's just how they do it.
Yeah, you looked, okay, so as an observer,
Yeah.
you looked so in your element with it. I think he just needs to preach with the staff.
I might have to do that regularly.
Yeah, you just kind of lean on it, both hands.
Yeah.
Lean right on it. Yep.
So it was interesting. I didn't read this part in the book with Philip Keller. A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23, but Heidi has read it through a number of times. And so she was bringing up when he talks about the implement of the staff, that so it's for kind of guidance, certainly part of protection, but it's this guidance for the sheep, that piece. And yet it also provided comfort to the shepherd, because as a shepherd's been tending his sheep all day and he's tired, you just notice that the shepherd leans on his own staff.
It takes some weight off, right?
Yeah. And it just provides a little bit of relief. And so how interesting that he was just kind of reflecting on that notion that it's actually comfort for the shepherd too.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now, I don't think the Lord needs comfort.
Oh, I see.
He gives comfort.
Sure.
But
at some point the metaphor breaks down.
Well, it does, but when we think about how we, like, as pastors, ministry leaders, there's a shepherding component to that.
Absolutely.
As parents, there's a shepherding component to that.
Big time.
And people who are employers, there is shepherding. Like if you're an employer in Christ, you're shepherding. That's just a part of what that is. And so a lot of us would be kind of under shepherds of the great shepherd.
Yep.
And we get tired. And there are times where I feel very tired. And so that staff is something to lean on that is comforting to me.
Yeah, that's right.
The shepherd finds comfort in that too. So it's the comfort of the sheep, but it's the comfort of the shepherd too.
So look at you. As you were under shepherding this Sunday, you were finding comfort in the staff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It looked cool.
Well, it felt pretty. It felt pretty intuitive.
Yeah. No, it was good. It was good. And there's something about the visual too. Seeing it, and then tracing it back to this idea of the symbol of authority. And think about ways that shows up in Scripture. I think that's just really important for us to receive that and understand that cultural aspect of it.
Right. And I try to draw this out in the message too, that it's not the implements themselves that are the comfort. It's the shepherd who wields those instruments and their trust of his character.
Yes.
Because you could have a dillweed shepherd who would beat the sheep with the rod.
He'd be a harsh shepherd, yeah.
Or with the staff, exercising harshness to kind of alleviate his own frustration or anger. And sometimes we approach God that's how he is operating with us.
Yeah, that sometimes is our perspective of him, or at least maybe the communities of faith in which we grew up could give us that impression. Whether it's ever said overtly, most of the time I think it's inferred. But yeah, and you highlighted some of these in the message. I was even thinking back to really good friends and some even mentors talking about God taking them out to the woodshed to teach them a lesson. God giving them a spanking, or God, like whatever it might be, and just the way that you unpacked this psalm faithfully in its context really gave good insight and perspective on that's not Yahweh. That is not our good shepherd, Jesus. That is not how he cares for us. Nor is it actually how he corrects us by beating us. That's not what he does.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's just well done. It was very, very faithful to the text, and bringing out cultural aspects that I think are really important for many in our community, and I'm going to put myself in that too.
Well, and I needed some of those pieces for me, and so it felt timely for me, as a good message of good news, that God's power can be trusted, because of who he is.
Yeah, and then how he leverages that power is actually to protect.
Yeah.
And to guard and to keep.
Not to beat me down as a sheep, but to guard and protect. And then the staff, the guide, wisdom, can be trusted.
That's right.
Because he doesn't manipulate. He doesn't we talk about God's control. We can get ourselves a little sideways and even know what we mean by control. He doesn't make us automatons.
No, that's not what it means for God to be sovereign.
Yeah, but out of his love, he guides, and his wisdom can be trusted. Because he's the one that knows the path.
Correct.
And he's walked that path before.
Yeah.
He's walked through the dark valley, and he knows the way.
Yeah, and there's times in life for all of us that we need comfort. Like sometimes we're in those deep dark valleys and they are death. They feel like death, and sometimes they are literal death, right? Yeah. And yet our good shepherd is with us, blazing that trail before us and guiding us and guarding us, keeping us along the path. So I think it's a good time to introduce our listeners into not just a fellow staff member here at Centerpoint Church, but has become a friend of mine in my time here. So we'd like to welcome Dave Pelletier. So Dave, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
So, in your journey, and I've been privileged to hear pieces of this just as I've gotten to know you over these almost handful of years now. But you even recently shared in one of the groups that you're a part of a little bit more of your journey. And it is one that is filled with God comforting you and experiencing God as your comforter in some really, really deep, dark valleys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, insofar as you are comfortable sharing, kind of lead us into how you have experienced your good shepherd as your comforter.
Sure. Be happy to. Before I start, though, I'd like to just make one quick comment about the rod and the staff. I can say, even with 4 sons over the years, I never used the rod and staff. I used a baseball bat.
I did think of you when I was up there with the rod. I thought, if this was Dave, he'd be wielding a little baseball bat
or a big one. No, it's been good, and what you shared on Sunday was, it hit home in many ways, and the biggest one I think in my life, which I'll share. Without doing a ton of background, I'm from New Hampshire, but my wife, late wife, and was from Ohio, had 4 sons, none of them born in New Hampshire. So we lived in a number of different places over the years. And in 1998, late 98, we made a journey back to New Hampshire to live, and we were living in Georgia at the time. So we all came back. The boys were at that point, I think, 20, 18, 12, and 10 years old for the 4 sons. And we came up, and we ended up in Sanbornton on Lake Winnisquam, where my folks had had a camp since I was 4 years old. And we tore it down to build a house there. And
now, that was about the time right after New Hampshire statehood, right?
Yes.
When you were 4 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm just checking on that.
Yeah, I knew the founders well.
You were one of them. Right now. Yeah. Come on now.
But so we came up, and we were living in some temporary housing for a while. And April of 99, my wife went in for just an OB/GYN exam, and they asked her if she had bronchitis, and she said no. And they said, well, we want to check your lungs, so we'll take x-rays. And when they did, they found a spot on her lungs, and they found fluid in the sacs around her lungs. And so we went further. My sister was in the medical field, so she got us an appointment in Boston at Mass General. And I remember sitting there with my wife, listening and hearing about lung cancer, even though there was no smoking, nothing of that in the sort in any of our backgrounds. But it was lung cancer, and he gave the prognosis to survive it at 2%. So, and gave us the alternatives: chemo, do nothing, or go an external route, another route. And my wife, knowing what she had heard, and we discussed it, she said, I'm gonna fight this. I'm not going to chemo. And which she did. I mean, she drank some of the ugliest stuff I've ever seen, full glasses of garlic and juice, and it was just amazing how strong she was through that. And with the 4 boys there, it was quite an ordeal. So as we moved through it, she was getting help from a Christian organization who ended up arranging for her to go to Georgia, back to Georgia actually, for testing in this clinic. Interestingly enough, her parents were still living in Georgia, as well as her brother. So we went into the hospital. They did a whole bunch of tests and basically said that there was really nothing they could do after doing all the tests. So that was in September of 1999, and she died later that month. And obviously it was hugely traumatic for the whole family, especially for the 4 boys. And I still have under my mat up in my office, I have the last thing she wrote in her journal. She used to journal many, many times, and I have her last couple of lines. And it was really into trusting God through all this, and to thanking her for her sons, for her parents, for myself. And it was pretty moving, especially to have that happen. Excuse me. So what I did that morning, she died at 4:00 in the morning. And later that morning, a few hours later, I called the pastor that we had sat under in New Jersey for many years, maybe 10 years. And I asked him, I said, his name was Alan Dunn. And I said, Alan, Barb had died. And could you give me a verse? And he paused and said, here's the best I can give you. And what he gave me was, he said, read 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 through 5. And I remember going to it right away and reading it. And I have it, I'll just very briefly, I won't read the whole thing.
No, please.
But he said that verse 3 starts, all praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. God is our merciful Father and the source of all comfort. He comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they are troubled, we will be able to give them the same comfort God has given us. For the more we suffer for Christ, the more God will shower us with his comfort through Christ. And it hit me in the heart. It hit me between the eyes. Actually, I remember thinking quickly, a little negative, saying, I'm the one who needs the comfort now, and you're telling me I'm supposed to comfort others.
Yeah, I called you for some comfort here.
Yeah. And what'd you give me back? But at that moment, it became one of and now my top life verse, because I realized what God had done in the whole process. We had, prior to the months leading up to when she died, we had read Psalms together every night and prayed over them. And we knew, even doing that, knowing that the prognosis was not that good. Yes, we could say we were looking for a miracle, but Barb never gave up in the whole process. And we, the family, supported it like crazy. But when she did die, and then hearing that verse literally on the day she died about comfort, it has made a huge, huge impact in my life. And I'd love to say everything has been perfect since then. But it's life, and it hasn't been. But that verse of knowing where my comfort is coming from and knowing I can trust God is the most important thing in my life now. I ended up 10 years later getting married to Christina, and it was wonderful. And she believes, and that's just a powerful comfort to me. But at the time when everything was crashing in around me and the family, the comfort that was promised through God's word made a huge, huge impact in my life. And what's interesting is a couple things. One, because it's been my life verse, it's amazing how many times I've interfaced with other people over the years, especially in the men's groups and such. And people come in with prayer requests and things like that are pretty powerful and going through very difficult times. And that's a verse I've gone to every single time with them, praying in the moment, but also sending it to them in an email. And, it has such a huge impact on them. And many of them have shared that. But it's not me. It's what God wrote in his word and what he promised in his word. And basically fulfilling his promise became something that was ultimately extremely important for me. And there's been ups and downs since then. I mentioned to Matt and Joe very briefly that, one of the things that I shake my head today, because 2 years after Barb died, I got notice that the crematorium, and you may remember this in the news, in the national news, that there was a crematorium down in Georgia that basically took, I think it ended up being 137 bodies and didn't cremate them, and put them in the woods and put them in the lake and other things, and a shed. And unfortunately, that's where Barb went. But in the process, very quickly, I had to go down and give a deposition. And I remember sitting in the room with the lawyers who were defending the funeral homes and others that were involved in this. And basically, they tried to make it sound like, aren't you going for psychological help? Aren't you going for just treatment of some kind because of this trauma? And not cavalierly by any means, but I said, no. I know where my wife is right now, and I believe I'm going to be with her someday. So the faith part was the most important thing. And, what that person did was not good, but I actually had written him a letter and to forgive him in that whole process. And interestingly enough, many, many years later, I come to find out he's now a pastor after serving time in prison. Very serious.
Wow.
That's remarkable.
Wow.
I've read a podcast on it. So it's just something that you just take a step back and realize what God can do. And sometimes he's amazing. But for me, the two things are knowing the comfort that he provides and knowing that I trust him. And trusting him is to me what the most important thing I could possibly do. So hearing on Sunday about the rod and the staff and how God leads us and protects us and guides us through the worst situations maybe we can imagine. Many of you, I'm sure, have had worse. But I know for me, it's been something that's been ingrained in me. And if I can share it with others, I want to do that.
Dave, what would you say are some of the ways that you experienced God's comfort, like the tangible ways that you experienced his comfort? Particularly early on as you're in this grieving process, and I can it hits home because you have 4 boys. Mm-hmm. So here I am sitting next to you. I got 4 of my own, right? So you're having to walk your own journey of grief. Mm-hmm. And then you're trying to help your boys walk this journey. So what are some examples of how you experienced God's comfort?
I can give you two, I think, interesting ones. The family, Barb's family, and my boys, they're all very athletic. So this may sound a little weak, but a couple days after the service that we had in Georgia for Barb, we decided we've got to, use the phrase, we got to blow off some stink. So we all went down to the basketball court that was in the part of the development to play basketball. And as we were playing, one of my nephews was guarding me, and all of a sudden I felt this sharp pain in the back of my leg, and I turned around and said, CJ, did you just kick me? He said, no, I wasn't near you. And as soon as he said that, I knew that I had ruptured my Achilles.
Oh my word.
And so fortunately it was my left one, so I could make the drive back with 2 of the dogs from Georgia to New Hampshire. But it had an important thing that happened because of that, besides the ruptured Achilles.
Oh my.
Was one of my sons, the second oldest, Pete, ended up becoming mom when we got home, because I was, you know what an Achilles injury can last a long, long time for recovery. So doing things around the house, the cooking, the cleaning, all that kind of stuff, he jumped in and did an incredible job. And so, I look at how God worked in that process. Not that I wanted another, because I had ruptured my other one 20 years earlier. Not that I wanted that, but I looked at it afterwards and thought, God, that was amazing that you did that, because it brought all of us together in a special way. And then my wife had homeschooled the boys, the 2 younger boys, Dan and Jake, 12 and 10. Mm. And Matt was in college. The oldest was in college in Colorado. And Pete was about ready to start college at Plymouth State that year. So Matt took a year off. Pete delayed entering a year, and they each took one of their younger brothers and homeschooled them for the year. Because actually I was doing a fair amount of traveling and such, so I couldn't. But Pete and Matt did that for his 2 younger brothers. Now, I know which younger brother got the better deal of that, but and which one had more fun. But it was just a special thing that it wasn't me saying, "Would you do this?" or they came up with it on their own. And all I could do is thank God for their hearts and their minds to come up with something like that and to offer to do something like that. So that was, an example of something that precipitated from a tragic experience, but became something that was, in hindsight, a real blessing. So.
Yeah, so you have completely reoriented my imagination around Achilles injuries. They are now a source of comfort.
Then I hope you get one.
Oh, no. I take it back. I recant.
No,
Edit this out.
you don't want to do that. So
That's remarkable, Dave. Thank you for sharing that story with us and your heart with us. And it's just, seeing here you are being shepherded by the Lord, reaching out to this pastor. You have to shepherd your boys through this at various ages. What was their age? What was the age spread when Barb died?
Matt, oldest, was 20. Pete was 18. Dan was 12. And Jake was 10.
Okay. So you got these boys that you still have, they're looking to you, shepherding, but they had to be able to look at each other and be in it together.
Yeah. Matt, I'm laughing because it was like he said it yesterday, but Barb's dad, Dick Barron, was a great, great guy. And, he was really into athletics, which made it great with all of us and such. But I'll never forget, 2 days after Barb died, we were sitting around their kitchen table. And in all seriousness, Dick looks at me and says, "Dave, who's going to raise these boys?" I looked around and I said, "What am I, chopped liver?" And his heart was there because he knew how much Barb poured into them. But, I look back on it now and have to laugh. He just had such a good heart, but he really cared about the boys.
Yeah. Well, and you were in your career is not a easy-go-lucky kind of career, right? And so you even talked about needing to travel and that kind of thing. So you're in the thick of that, but you still being able to shepherd your boys. And Dave, I have experienced comfort from you, and one of the ways that I experience that is you're a source of wisdom, yes, but in moments when maybe I'll send out a text to the staff team of something that I'm struggling with, and almost every time your reply is a prayer. And you put words to prayer in such a remarkable way. There's a few people that I know that do that well, and you are one of them. And those prayers have really been a comfort to me in moments of that, which is a tangible expression of that passage that you were talking about. As you have received comfort out of that place, you offer comfort. And it's interesting, even as I'm saying this and reflecting on that passage in 2 Corinthians, I'm thinking about the ways that I often think that my best that I offer to somebody else comes from my victory and strength.
Your best foot forward.
When in fact, the kingdom economy that Paul has articulated in 2 Corinthians, it's actually out of our weakness and brokenness where we have received comfort that we then offer that to somebody else.
That's well said.
And I don't know that I always like the math of that. Because the only time that comfort makes sense to receive is in the midst of the darkness, in the midst of suffering, in the midst of sorrow. And it's not a chosen suffering and sorrow, but it's one that this life affords us. If we're going to walk through life, we're going to walk through dark valleys. And the shepherd is with us. He reminds us that he's with us through the comfort that others offer, because it's a comfort that's fueled by his Spirit. Again, that passage Paul is talking about. And that which we have received becomes the gift that's given for another. And it doesn't always make the suffering okay. Sometimes we think, well, the suffering that I'm walking through is okay as long as someday I can use it. Where, yes, the way the kingdom works is out of your brokenness and the comfort you've received, you will comfort another. So that part is true. Suffering, there isn't a math that makes suffering okay, but it is God's presence. It is his love walking us through the dark valley that makes us okay. Right? Death is always an offense to life. It's never in itself okay. And yet God meets us even in the darkest place of sorrow and loss, even in death, and ushers us through in his gentleness, in his humility, right? Take my yoke upon you. I am gentle, humble, Jesus says. And out of who he is, he leads us through. Wielding the rod and the staff, he is our comfort. Dave, this has been just a phenomenal conversation. Thank you again for sharing this with us.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Thanks for letting me share.
And we get to see your heart and get glimpses of your heart, as we walk together as staff. So I love that. More of our church gets to catch a glimpse of that too, and we are better off because of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, this has been good to process with you. And those of you who are listening in, we continue to process together. And as I'm listening to Dave, as I process the 2 Corinthians passage, as I go back into Psalm 23, it's like my brain and my heart just keep firing off on what this looks like. And that's why we processed it together.
Yeah, that's why we're meditating on Scripture together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Lord is my shepherd. And because he's my shepherd, I have enough. Because with him, I have what I need. And he's the one that leads in the right paths. And even when we walk through the darkest of valleys, we don't have to be afraid because he's with us. And the one who is with us doesn't come empty-handed. The one who is with us, this good shepherd, wields the rod, authority, strength, defending. He wields the staff. He guards and protects, rescues, guides. He wields these things out of his love. And in that, I'm comforted.